Brandon Phillips fired me while he was standing on a conference room table, grinning like he had just saved the company. 25 people watched him point down at me and shout, "You're done, Rick." 13 years of keeping Phillips Tech alive, and he was dismissing me like dead weight, talking with his mouth full of a protein bar. I did not argue. I did not beg. I did not give him the scene he wanted. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the master access ring, and set it down on the table next to his shoe. "Good luck with that," I said. Brandon smirked. He thought those were just keys. He was about to learn they controlled everything. If a story like this keeps you listening, take a second to subscribe and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Because what happened in the 5 days after I walked out proved something I had known for years. One quiet person can be the only thing holding an entire company up. Brandon Phillips had not built Phillips Tech. He had inherited the stage, the name, and the easy confidence of a man who had never once slept under his desk at 3 in the morning waiting for a server to come back online. His father, Bill Phillips, had stepped away for what he called a personal clarity journey, and the board reluctantly handed Brandon the interim chief executive title to keep the family name on the door. That title went straight to his head. To be fair to him, Brandon had spent his whole life trying to climb out of his father's shadow. The problem was that he thought respect was something you frightened out of people. He wanted the board to see a bold new leader instead of the spoiled son everyone quietly doubted. So he confused being feared with being followed. Within a week, he was calling himself a macro visionary and walking the hallways like each one was a runway. He talked about disruption, optimization, and trimming legacy weight, but he did not actually understand the company he was trying to reshape. He understood performance. He understood the look of leadership. He had never once understood the wiring underneath it. First, he fired Jerry, the quiet company historian, who knew where every process document was buried. Then he cut the wellness budget. Then he dismissed 2 remote employees over a video call and muted them before they could finish saying goodbye. But I was the trophy, the public execution, the name everyone in the building knew. Brandon needed to prove the old guard was finished, and to do that, he needed an audience. So he chose me. I walked out of that conference room without giving him a single thing to enjoy. No shouting. No begging, no dramatic speech for the 25 people staring down at the carpet like they had just watched a car accident and did not know where it was safe to look. I passed the reception desk. I passed the frozen interns. I passed that ridiculous poster on the wall that said, "Innovation drives excellence," with a photo of a mountain nobody in that office had ever climbed. 13 years in that building. And somehow the hallway felt twice as long on the way out. But I did not drive home. I sat in my truck in the parking garage with the engine off, staring at the master access ring in my palm. Those keys felt heavier than the metal they were made of. They held access, authority, and 13 years of responsibility that Brandon had just thrown away like a used coffee cup. Then I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the blue binder. That blue binder was not a revenge file. I want to be honest about that. It was simply 13 years of institutional memory, held together by worn plastic tabs and old coffee stains. Infrastructure protocols, federal compliance matrices, vendor authorization codes, security certifications that Brandon had never bothered to learn existed. On paper, my title was Director of Infrastructure Operations. It sounded ordinary enough to ignore, and that was exactly why he ignored it. But buried inside those documents was the part of the truth that mattered. I was the designated systems custodian for Phillips Tech's federal contractor certification. That meant my name was not just sitting on an employee roster. My signature was registered directly with federal agencies. My authentication tokens verified server access, financial controls, security clearances, vendor approvals, the backup generators, the badge readers, and every compliance report worth millions of dollars. Bill Phillips had trusted me with that responsibility 13 years earlier, back when the company still ran out of a converted warehouse with a leaking roof and one good air conditioner. I never asked for a corner office. I never needed applause. I just needed the systems to work. And they did, because I made sure of it. But quiet responsibility is still power, and Brandon had just fired the one man that every critical system in the building still trusted. Here is the part he did not understand. In a normal company, you do not fire a systems custodian the way you cancel a lunch order. You plan the transition for weeks. You document the handover. You update vendor portals, federal contacts, security credentials, banking approvals, badge permissions, and every access chain tied to that one person's name. You spend a month transferring trust from one human being to the next carefully, in writing. Brandon did none of that. He wanted theater. He wanted the old guard humiliated in front of the new one. He wanted people to whisper that he was fearless, decisive, the kind of leader who could cut anything that looked slow. What he never grasped is something simple. Some employees are not invisible because they are unimportant. They are invisible because everything works while they are there. You only notice them in the silence, after they are gone. That evening, sitting at my kitchen table, I did not plot anything. I made professional notification calls, the kind of calls you are legally required to make when your name is still tied to systems you no longer have any right to control. The first call was to Sandra at Data Vault Hosting. She answered on the second ring, and I could already hear the tension in her voice. "Rick, thank goodness. We have been getting credential verification errors all afternoon. What is happening over there?" "I am calling to let you know I am no longer authorized to approve maintenance overrides on the Tier 3 servers," I said. There was a long silence on the line. Then her voice dropped lower. "Rick, you are still listed as our primary federal contractor contact. You are the compliance verification officer in our portal. Your name is on everything." "Not anymore. You will need to contact Phillips Tech directly." "We tried," she said. "They transferred us to some kid named Bryce, and he hung up on me." I closed my eyes. Sandra had been in this industry for 20 years. She knew exactly what this meant. One missing verified signature could freeze hosting, billing, and compliance status across the board. "Rick," she said carefully, "if we cannot verify this within the window, we may have to suspend services pending an audit. I do not want to, but I will not have a choice." The second call went to Tom at SecureGrid, the company that managed our badge readers and the surveillance network. Tom actually let out a tired little laugh when I explained I had been fired. "Well, that explains the alerts," he said. "Somebody tried rebooting your authentication server around 3 this afternoon." "They did what?" "Looks like they treated it like a regular office computer. Hit restart when the badges started throwing errors. Now the whole system is stuck in safe mode and rejecting every administrator command we send it." I pressed my hand against my forehead. "Can you create new access?" "No," Tom said. And he said it slowly so I would understand. "Your biometric signature is hard-coded into the root authentication chain. Without your in-person biometric verification, nobody on Earth can create a new administrator on that system. Not me. Not them. Nobody." "How long before full lockdown?" 72 hours, he said. After that, they are looking at a complete reinstall from scratch. The third call was to Maria at Apex Logistics, our facilities management contractor. She sounded exhausted before I even finished the first sentence. "Rick, I am so glad you called. The heating and cooling system has been throwing bad temperature readings all afternoon. The backup generators will not accept remote commands, and the environmental dashboard keeps asking for an authorization token that nobody has. That is because facilities runs through the same authentication network as security, I told her. Temperature control, generator access, server room cooling, emergency overrides. They all verify against the same master credential chain. Maria went quiet for a moment. Can you walk me through the manual override? I cannot, Maria. I do not work there anymore. You will need authorization from Philips Tech. We tried, she said. They told us you were the only one who had administrative access. And there it was again, a different vendor, a different system. The exact same answer. I should have felt satisfied, maybe a small part of me did. But mostly I just felt tired. Those systems were never only passwords and protocols to me. They were the dinners I missed, the weekends I lost to audits, the birthday parties I left early to answer an emergency call from a dark parking lot. Brandon had erased all of it with one sentence and a protein bar. For 13 years, every critical function in that company had run through one trusted point of responsibility. Brandon thought he had removed a man. He had actually removed the company's spine. By Tuesday morning, the first wave hit. At 7:30 in the morning, Amy from reception called me from her personal phone. Her voice was low and rushed. Rick, nobody can get inside. The automatic badge system was supposed to unlock the building at 7. Instead, every reader stayed locked in secure mode because the authentication server could not verify a single administrative user. 280 employees were standing out in the parking lot, tapping their badges against dead readers like tourists locked out of a museum. Managers paced, interns whispered, and Brandon stood near the front entrance, screaming into his phone as if volume could override a federal security protocol. Raj, our head of technology, tried to explain it to him as calmly as a human being possibly could. We cannot transfer the master credentials without Rick. Brandon snapped at him. Then hack around it. Raj answered very evenly. That would trigger a federal security breach. I am not going to prison for this. Brandon's next brilliant idea was a locksmith. The man showed up around 9, carrying a drill case and wearing the expression of someone who had already been blamed for problems he did not cause. He studied the badge readers, the glass doors, and the security panel for less than a minute before he shook his head. These are not regular locks, he said. This is an integrated electronic security system. If I drill through this, I will set off alarms that go all the way to Washington. Brandon's face went red, so he called the fire department and tried to label it an emergency access issue. Fire Chief Mercer showed up, a former Marine with calm eyes and absolutely no patience for corporate panic. He listened for about 30 seconds, then looked straight at Brandon. Son, this is not a fire emergency. Your people can get out of the building just fine. They simply cannot get back in. That is not a rescue problem. That is a management problem. By then, everybody standing in that parking lot had heard enough to know exactly who had caused it. The building finally opened at 2 in the afternoon, and not because Brandon solved anything. Sandra from Data Vault drove over with an emergency access device they kept for exactly this kind of situation. She had to verify temporary credentials by hand, document the override, and file a compliance note explaining why Philips Tech needed an outside vendor just to enter its own building. The cost was $5,000. $5,000 just to unlock doors that had opened perfectly the morning before. Employees walked in tired, embarrassed, and whispering. Brandon tried to act like the crisis had passed, like it was all a small technical hiccup. But anyone who understood systems knew better. The locked doors were not the disaster. They were only the smoke before the fire. Because once the building opened, the deeper problems started to wake up. payroll, vendors, federal compliance. And every single one of them still had my name buried inside it. By Wednesday morning, the crisis moved from doors to money. Janet from finance called me before 9. She sounded like someone trying very hard not to panic. "Rick, I know this is awkward, and I am so sorry to call you, but payroll will not process. The system needs your authorization token for the direct deposit run." I looked down at my coffee, which had already gone cold. "Janet, I do not work there anymore. Brandon needs to update the authorization matrix." "That is exactly what I told him," she whispered. "He told me to override it somehow." I almost laughed. Except there was nothing funny about 280 people waiting on a paycheck. "You cannot override federal banking controls with management enthusiasm," I said. "Phillips Tech is a federal contractor. Every payroll transaction needs dual verification, finance approval, and compliance verification. My signature was the second half of that." Janet went silent. "How long do we have?" 72 hours before the processor freezes the account," I said. "After that, you will be cutting paper checks by hand for the entire company." Thursday brought the supply chain crisis. TechFlow Industries, our primary component supplier, suspended every shipment pending customer verification. Their system had flagged Phillips Tech as a compliance risk because every purchase order still required approval from the designated custodial officer. That officer had been me. Steve Barrett, their account manager, called to explain it as gently as he could. "Rick, I want to help you here, but your company fired its verified signatory without updating our authorization database. From our side, Phillips Tech is now operating without proper financial controls." "How long to fix it?" 6 to 8 weeks minimum, he said. "New background checks, new federal verification, a fresh credit review." Then his voice dropped, the way people lower their voice when they are about to say something they should not. "Off the record, Rick, this looks bad. Companies do not usually fire a compliance officer with no transition unless something is wrong. My legal department is already asking whether Phillips Tech is under some kind of investigation." Friday brought the call I had been quietly expecting all week. "Mr. Coleman, this is Jennifer Walsh from Meridian Legal," the woman said. Her voice was calm, but every single word sounded like it was being written down as she spoke it. "We are conducting a compliance alignment review regarding the Phillips Tech contract." Meridian was not just another client. They were the client. The $280 million logistics contract that Brandon had been bragging about since his very first week in the corner office. Jennifer asked about my role, my termination, and whether a formal transition had ever been completed. "No," I said. "I was told to clean out my desk and leave the building immediately." There was a pause. "Were you aware of any compliance violations that might have prompted your termination?" "No, I was fired because the interim chief executive decided I was dead weight." Another pause, longer this time. "In your professional opinion, Mr. Coleman, does Phillips Tech currently have proper custodial oversight for its federal contracting requirements?" I looked at the blue binder sitting on my kitchen table. "No," I said, "it does not." By Monday morning, the hammer came down. Meridian's procurement office sent Phillips Tech a formal notice. Contract negotiations were suspended, pending a full compliance verification review. Just like that, the $280 million contract, which was nearly 40% of the company's annual revenue, was frozen solid. Brandon called an emergency staff meeting in the very same conference room where he had fired me. "This is a temporary misunderstanding," he told the room. "It is just paperwork." Raj raised his hand. "If it is just paperwork, why can we not fix it?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "We are working on it." "Who is working on it?" Raj asked, and you could hear the whole room go still. Rick was the compliance officer. You fired the one person who knew how the system worked, and you did it on camera. Nobody said anything after that. There was nothing left to say. By that afternoon, the company's stock had dropped 12%. Bill Phillips cut his personal clarity journey short and flew home before the next news cycle could bury the company he had spent his life building. By Wednesday, he was back inside Phillips Tech, moving through the building with a face I had not seen on him in years. Not angry, not loud. It was worse than that. He looked afraid. He stopped outside offices and pulled board members into quiet conversations. He listened as one department head after another explained failures that Brandon had been calling temporary friction. The Meridian contract was frozen. Payroll was unstable. Vendors were backing away. Federal compliance records were under review. And reporters had already connected the timeline. Compliance officer fired on a Monday. Major contracts suspended by the following Friday. That is the kind of pattern that regulators notice. Employees whispered in the break rooms. Managers avoided eye contact in the hallways. Nobody said the word layoffs out loud, but everyone could feel it hanging over the office floor like bad weather rolling in. Bill had left for peace. He came back to find that his son had turned the company's quiet machinery into a public warning sign. For the first time, Bill was not looking at Brandon like a son who needed guidance. He was looking at him like a liability the company might not survive, and that was the moment everyone in the building finally understood. This was no longer a family embarrassment. This was a corporate emergency. Thursday evening, Michael, the general counsel, called me. "Rick, the board needs your professional assessment. Can you come in tomorrow at 9? Am I being subpoenaed? No, he said quickly. We just need the truth from someone who actually knows it. So Friday morning, I put on my best suit and walked back into the building, where I had been humiliated less than 2 weeks earlier. The same lobby, the same polished floors, the same mountain poster on the wall. But the mood had changed completely. Nobody smirked at me this time. A few people would not meet my eyes at all. Inside the boardroom, Bill sat at the head of the table looking 5 years older than he had a month ago. Brandon was there too, silent for once, with a lawyer on one side of him and a stack of documents marked with my name on the other. Michael began carefully. "Rick, can you explain your role as the system's custodian?" For 20 minutes, I explained exactly what Brandon had destroyed. I explained the federal contractor requirements, the vendor authorization matrices, the financial oversight protocols, the badge systems, the server credentials, the entire compliance chain that my single signature had quietly protected for 13 years. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. When I finished, one of the board members leaned forward. "Mr. Coleman, can Phillips Tech currently fulfill its federal contracting obligations?" "No, sir," I said, "not without significant remediation and recertification." "How significant?" 6 to 8 months, at the minimum. New background checks, new vendor qualifications, new federal oversight approval, and that all assumes no further violations are discovered during the review. Brandon finally snapped. "This is being exaggerated. We can hire consultants to handle some paperwork." Michael slid a folder across the table toward him. "These are estimates from 3 separate compliance firms," he said. "Minimum cost, $2.8 million. Timeline, 12 to 18 months. And no guarantee at all that the federal agencies will accept the transition." Then came the real blow. "The Securities and Exchange Commission has opened a preliminary inquiry," Michael added quietly. "They want to know why we fired our compliance officer with no documented handover." The board stayed in session for another hour while I waited in the lobby. watching employees hurry past with the nervous energy of people who already know that bad news is coming. Around noon, Bill Phillips came out alone. "Rick," he said quietly, "I want to apologize. What Brandon did was wrong. The way he did it was inexcusable, and I should have been here." "I appreciate that, Bill. I do." He looked tired enough to fall over. "I want to offer you your job back. Full reinstatement. A vice president title, whatever it takes to make this right." I had expected the offer. I had not expected the sadness in his voice when he made it. "I cannot come back," I said. "Why not? We need you. I need you." "Because 6 months from now, when everything is calmed down, someone like Brandon will decide all over again that I am dead weight. And I cannot build my life around someone else's definition of what I am worth." That afternoon, the board voted to remove Brandon as interim chief executive. The press release came out polished and bloodless, the way corporate apologies always do. Leadership transition, operational continuity, strategic realignment, careful words stacked up like sandbags around a flood. But everyone inside Phillips Tech knew exactly what it meant. They had fired the boss's son before he could burn the rest of the company to the ground. Bill returned as active chairman, older now, quieter, and finally aware of how fragile his company had become, without the people who held it together from the inside. Brandon was gone from the executive floor by the end of the day. No dramatic goodbye, no speech from the top of a conference table. Just a closed office door, a cardboard box, and a security guard walking beside him through the same lobby where I had walked out alone. I did not celebrate. There is no joy in watching a company you helped build start to bleed because one arrogant man mistook responsibility for weakness. But there was justice, quiet, documented, unavoidable justice. That weekend, I did something I should have done years earlier. I started Coleman Systems Consulting. Nothing fancy. A small office downtown, a state business registration, a box of business cards that still smelled like the print shop, one used desk, one reliable laptop, and a lifetime of knowledge that nobody could ever fire out of me. By Monday morning, the phone started ringing. Steve Barrett from TechFlow called first. "Rick, I heard you are consulting now. I have got 3 clients asking about compliance verification. Any interest?" Then Sandra from DataVault called. "Our federal contractor clients are nervous after watching what happened. Can you run audits for us?" By Wednesday, I had 5 signed clients and 3 more consultations on the calendar. That Friday morning, I sat alone in my little office with a paper cup of coffee and my own name on the door. Nobody was shouting. Nobody was calling me dead weight. And for the first time in years, the phone ringing did not feel like a crisis. It felt like proof. Word travels fast in the federal contracting world, especially when a major company nearly collapses because it underestimated the quiet man who held all the paperwork, the passwords, and the trust together with 2 hands. Phillips Tech survived, but barely. Bill managed to stabilize operations, yet the damage Brandon had done could not be polished away with a press release. The Meridian contract was gone for good. $280 million vanished from the company's future, like a door closing quietly at the end of a long, dark hallway. To stay solvent, Phillips Tech laid off 85 people. 85 families paid the bill for one man's arrogance. Then the company sold off its entire government contracting division. The same division I had spent 13 years protecting, documenting, and keeping compliant through audits, outages, security scares, and 100 sleepless nights nobody ever thanked me for. As for Brandon, he disappeared from the local business scene. No more conference table speeches. No more macro-visionary interviews. The last I heard, he had moved to Austin and was running a cryptocurrency startup, telling everyone he met that he specialized in disruption. That part, at least, made perfect sense. Disruption was the only thing he had ever truly delivered. 6 months later, I was sitting in my expanded office, reviewing a proposal for a $40 million federal consulting contract, when Amy stepped into my doorway. She had left Phillips Tech to come work for me, and she was trying very hard not to smile. "Rick," she said, "Bill Phillips is here. He wants to hire Coleman Systems Consulting for compliance oversight." I looked out my window at the Phillips Tech building across the street. It was still standing, but it was smaller now, quieter, humbled by the same systems it had once been too proud to notice. For a moment, I remembered Brandon's smirk. The conference room, the protein bar, the words dead weight thrown at me like garbage in front of 25 people. Then I looked back at Amy. "Tell Bill I will call him back," I said. "I am booked solid for the next 6 months." Sometimes revenge does not need a raised voice. Sometimes it just sounds like a calendar that is completely full. Looking back now, I realize I never had to destroy Phillips Tech. Brandon did that all by himself, the moment he mistook cruelty for leadership and noise for courage. I did not sabotage a single server. I did not leak one document. I did not beg for revenge. I simply walked away when they told me I was no longer needed. And the truth filled the empty space behind me, all on its own. Some people keep the lights on so quietly that nobody ever notices their hands until the room goes dark. They might not have the biggest title, they might never get the applause. But take them away and everything cracks. I did not win because Phillips Tech lost. I won because I finally stopped waiting for people like Brandon to understand my value. Some doors close because you are being rejected. Others close because life is quietly pushing you toward a room where you actually belong. If this story reminded you of someone who was underestimated, of a person who was treated like dead weight, while they were the only thing holding everything together, tell me about them in the comments. Would you have stayed silent and walked away with your dignity, or would you have confronted them in front of everyone? And if stories about betrayal, karma, and the kind of quiet justice that finally brings peace are the ones that stay with you, subscribe to the channel for more. Brandon called me dead weight. But dead weight does not hold up a company.